15 haunting confessions exposed, spine-chilling stories of the sinister and unexplained. Sarah had finally escaped. In the sunlit suburb of Maplewood, she thought she could heal. The houses stood in neat rows, and laughter filled the air as children rode bikes. But the safety of her new life quickly unraveled. At night, when shadows deepened, Sarah's heart raced. Whispers slipped through the walls, cold and sinister, threading through her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Just outside her children's bedroom, shadows flickered too quick, too deliberate. The anticipation twisted her stomach in knots. Desperate, her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. She called the local police, her voice steady but quaking inside. "I think something is wrong in my house." Their laughter echoed through the speaker, a cruel dismissal of her fears. "You've had a tough time, ma'am. Maybe you need to talk to someone." "Paranoia," they said. The word felt like a laceration across her already ragged psyche. Seeking solace, she turned to her neighbors, hoping for help. But their warm smiles cloaked a frost of apprehension. They exchanged quick glances, whispers laced with fear. Only Old Man Jenkins, the retired mailman, offered her a moment's reprieve. One autumn evening, the air crisp with dread, he pulled her aside. "The previous family, they just vanished." His voice dropped to a whisper, "Left everything behind. You should be careful." Sarah's heart stuttered. They hadn't just moved, they disappeared. Every creak of wood sent jolts of terror through her. Her new home transformed into a prison, haunted by invisible chains. Meanwhile, one neighbor, a woman with far too warm a smile, stayed just a bit too long during visits. Sarah felt her skin crawl. The woman's eyes were too watchful, her intentions too hidden. The thought of her kids around that woman left her cold and shaking. As night fell, the house revealed more of its secrets. The shadows grew darker, morphed into shapes that danced at the corners of her vision. Something was in the air, past the walls, breathing in tune with her racing heartbeat. But nothing prepared her for the night. She stumbled across an old, dusty trunk in the attic, filled with remnants of the previous inhabitants' lives, tattered photographs, faded letters, relics of something unsettling. The soil beneath her home held more than just dirt, it was soaked in secrets, betrayal, a ritual bound in blood. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah felt an urge, a dreadful pull towards the backyard, where the whispers grew louder, beckoning. With every step, dread clung like a shroud, cocooning her in an icy grip. The moonlight revealed an old, gnarled tree, roots twisted like gnarled hands reaching out. The air hummed with tension, resonating with an otherworldly vibration. As chilling realizations formed, each new shadow elongated, pressing in. She thought of that empty trunk, those ghosts that lingered in her home. What had happened to the last family? She could feel them, their pain, the weight of their stories suffocating her. Time wrestled with her instincts, fight or flee. As the night deepened, Sarah stood on the precipice of revelation. Between insidious spirits and treacherous neighbors, the haunting question tightened around her throat: was she truly safe? In a neighborhood that promised solace, was darkness already feasting on her fear? The relentless whispers grew louder, curling around Sarah like tendrils of smoke, each syllable dripping with malice. She could almost make out words, fragments of anguished cries, barely concealed threats. The old tree loomed before her, its bark rough, gnarled limbs twisting grotesquely against the velvety sky. An icy breeze swept through, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something far worse. Something rotten, heart thundering like a drum. Sarah felt an instinctive pull to the tree, as if it were alive, a guardian of buried secrets. Shaking violently, she stepped closer. Fear clawed at her throat, but curiosity washed over her like a wave. She felt drawn to the roots, dark and thick, burrowing into the earth. Kneeling, she traced a finger along the ground, feeling the warm pulse of life beneath the soil. What lay below? What terrors had been hidden from her? Suddenly, a low growl erupted from the shadows. Sarah's breath hitched. The air crackled with energy as a figure emerged, silhouetted against the backdrop of her home. It was a child small, no older than 5, with hollow eyes that bore a haunting sadness. The child's mouth opened, stretching into a smile, but there was nothing innocent about it, no warmth. Instead, fear sank its teeth into her, dragging her soul down into icy depths. "Help me!" the child whispered, voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "They won't let me go." Stumbling back, Sarah's mind raced. Who was this child? Why was he here? Glancing back at the house, she remembered the trunk, the photographs scattered like lost dreams. Were these remnants left by other victims? Riddled with dread, she turned back toward the tree, but the child had vanished. Only the whispers remained, rising in a twisted crescendo, the sounds of countless souls begging for release. No longer anchored to the present moment, reality slipped further away, twisting into the darkness. She felt something tugging at her sleeve. She whirled around to find the woman, the neighbor with the too warm smile, standing just a few paces behind her. The woman's eyes glinted with a dangerous delight, her lips forming a smug grin. "You shouldn't be out here," she cooed, stepping closer. "It's not safe, especially at night." Sarah swallowed hard. "What do you know? Who was that child?" The warmth in the woman's smile faded, a chill settling in the air. "Some things are better left buried, dear. Curiosity can lead to unfortunate discoveries." Dread pooled in her stomach, heavy and suffocating. The woman's voice dripped with threat, like honey tinged with poison. She wanted to retreat, to run back into the safety of her home, but suddenly the house seemed more like a tomb than a refuge, its walls enclosed by night and shadows. "Stay away from the tree," the neighbor warned softly, her tone eerily calm. "You wouldn't want to upset them, would you?" As the words wrapped around Sarah, she saw a movement from the corner of her eye. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, flickering and intertwining until they formed a swirling mass of confusion and despair. The laughter of children echoed through the darkness, but it was not joyful. It was sinister, heart-racing. Sarah turned back to the woman, desperation clawing at her voice. "I want to know what happened. I need to know." The woman leaned in closer, and for a fleeting moment, her perfectly manicured facade cracked, revealing something darker, something that chilled Sarah to the bone. "You really shouldn't have come here. There's still time to leave," she hissed. The fleeting kindness evaporated from the woman's expression. In its place was a cold certainty: the darkness wouldn't let her go without a fight. As the whispers intensified, Sarah felt trapped, caught between a past she didn't understand and a present that threatened her children. The darkness beckoned, and she could either plunge into its depths or unearth the truth behind the sinister nature of Maplewood. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The whispers had led her this far. They promised answers or destruction. With every heartbeat, her choice weighed heavier. What would she uncover if she dared to look deeper into the shadows? The sound of something scraping against wood echoed from her house, the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open, but she had locked up tight. What had the darkness released? The door creaked again, louder this time. Sarah's heart plunged into her stomach. She shot a panicked glance at the woman, but the neighbor merely grinned, her eyes glinting like stones in the dark. It was as if she reveled in Sarah's distress, feeding off it like a parasite. "Go back to the house now," the woman urged, her voice a sickly sweet syrup that wrapped around Sarah's resolve. "Before they find you." Should she run? Every cell screamed for her to flee, to escape the cold grip of fear clawing at her throat. But a terrible curiosity pulled her back toward the tree, deeper into the shadows. The whispers clawed at her ears, each word a moth fluttering toward a deadly flame. the air grew heavier around her, thick with anticipation. With a shaky breath, she turned her back on the woman and marched toward the house. Each step felt like traversing a graveyard of forgotten memories. The whispers turned into cries, and with each cry, she felt the weight of eyes watching her, hidden behind walls and in the dark corners of her mind. As she reached the door, it swung open as if inviting her in. A darkness loomed inside, thicker than she remembered. The shadows cast flickering shapes that danced along the walls, looming in grotesque silhouettes. She stepped inside, determination edging out fear as she willed herself to find the source of the creaking door. "Mom." The soft voice sent a chill racing down her spine. It was her daughter, Lily. But Sarah was sure she had locked the door. "Lily?" Panic tightened around her chest. She rushed into the living room, heart pounding as she scanned her surroundings. The room was dimly lit, shadows playing tricks on her sight. "Mommy! Help!" Lily's voice echoed again, desperate and laced with terror. Sarah turned toward the staircase, the shadows deepening there, forming dark figures that seemed to beckon her closer. "Stay right there," she called out, her throat dry. "I'm coming." But as she climbed the steps, another echo danced along her mind. The laughter from earlier filled the air, chilling her blood. When she reached the top, her hands trembled upon the banister. "Lily?" The sound of tiny footsteps pattered in the hallway. It drew her in, deeper and deeper into that oppressive darkness. Something told her she shouldn't follow, shouldn't venture further. But the thought of Lily alone, terrified, was enough to drown out the voice urging her to turn back. Suddenly, she stumbled upon her daughter's room, the door ajar. A slant of light cut through the darkness, shadowed edges beckoning her inside. She pushed the door open, dread coiling around her heart. What met her eyes sent waves of nausea spiraling in her gut. Lily wasn't alone. The child from the tree stood there beside her, a shadow blending with her own. Both faced away from Sarah, gazing out of the window, their expressions mirroring each other perfectly. "Help us," they whispered in unison, voices a haunting echo. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Get away from her!" Sarah screamed, stepping forward, but the shadows shifted, swallowing the light, swallowing her voice. The air thickened into a suffocating embrace, and the laughter stopped. Just then, the daughter turned to face her, eyes wide and empty, as if they reflected an abyss. Sarah staggered back, feeling a cold grip tighten around her throat. The room sank deeper into shadows, every corner meant to trap her within. "Mommy, come play." Lily's voice was no longer her own. It was a chorus of voices, tantalizing and horrifying. Just when Sarah thought their grip was tightening too much to bear, the door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The whispers swirled violently, and a new voice rose among them, sinister and deep. "They've been waiting for you." What had she unlocked? In that moment of chaos, one truth struck her like a bolt of lightning: it was never about simply seeing the shadows. It was about facing what lurked within her own flesh and blood. The room held an agonizing secret, and she knew she would have to wrestle it back from the edge of the abyss. But as silence engulfed her, dread clawed at her mind. What awaited her in the depths of the darkness? The darkness swallowed her whole. It was thick, a viscous fog that twisted around her, squeezing out the last breath of hysteria. Sarah pressed her back against the door, fingertips trembling against the cold wood. Footsteps echoed softly from the hallway. They were light, almost delicate. Her body tensed, the primal instinct to flee warring with the need to understand. What had happened to Lily? Where was the girl from the tree? "Mommy, come play." The voice slithered out of the shadows again, dragging each word like chains across her flesh. Although the plea resonated in her daughter's tone, Sarah could hear something else, something wrong buried beneath it. She needed to fight back the panic. "Lily! What is going on?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt, pushing through the remnants of fear. The silence quivered, and for a moment, she thought she heard a soft giggle, chilling and ghastly. A flash of recognition. The laughter had been there before, echoing from the depths of her nightmares. Sarah gritted her teeth, forcing herself to remain still, despite every instinct urging her to break the spell and rush for the window, for the porch, for anything but this cursed room. Then came the tapping, a delicate but insistent rhythm, the sound of small fingers rapping against the glass like a hollow promise. "Mommy, help us," a chorus again, this time layered with something darker. Her heart raced, a frantic drum against her ribs. Was it her imagination, or did shadows swirl in the corners, pulling closer? She risked a glance to the window, the only light now a weak, flickering beam. It barely illuminated the two girls standing side by side, ghostly images bathed in a sickly glow. They turned their heads simultaneously, and Sarah wished she hadn't looked. The other child's face twisted into something sinister, an expression cloaked in mischief and malice. Eyes that once mirrored innocence were now void of warmth, inviting her into a world that felt like it crushed hope beneath the weight of its darkness. "What do you want?" Sarah managed to whisper, every syllable tasting bitter as it hung in the air. Lily stepped forward, or rather the thing that looked like Lily. "Stay with us. Forever." The voice quaked, echoing through the room like an orchestration of lost souls. A dreadful realization washed over her. This wasn't just a game. They weren't alone. Others were hiding in the shadows, feeding on her fear. Families torn apart, children calling out, drawn in by the mirage of their own loved ones. "Get away from her!" Sarah shouted, throwing herself towards Lily's doppelganger. With a surge of adrenaline, she lunged forward, trying to break the connection. But as she reached for them, the air froze. Everything went still, the world drawn into a breathless pause. Then, with an ear-splitting crack, the room felt like it was collapsing. The floorboards shook beneath her, splintering apart as if they were parting curtains to a grand reveal. "Help us!" The shadows roared to life, swirling like a tempest, ensnaring her mind. Vision blurred, she could feel the pressure of 1,000 unseen hands grabbing at her, tearing at her sanity. Suddenly, a flash of light shattered the darkness, breaking through like an angry sun cutting through clouds. Sarah blinked, but the brightness baited her eyes, blinding her to the fate that awaited her beyond it. A shrill laugh erupted from Lily, and before she could react, icy fingers coiled around her ankle, dragging her back down into the abyss. How could she escape? Amid her thrashing, confusion struck hard. Was this really Lily? The thought spiraled through her mind like a broken record. With one last piercing scream, she fell into the depths, hoping to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the chaos. As the darkness consumed her, another voice whispered, a voice just familiar enough to send chills down her spine. "You'll never leave." What awaited Sarah in the grip of the shadows? Would she truly find Lily, or would the truth twist into something far more horrific? The chill wrapped around Sarah like a shroud. It felt as if the shadows had physical form, squeezing and tugging at her with an insatiable hunger. She gasped, struggling against the unseen force, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Panic surged, electrifying her limbs, igniting a desperate instinct to escape. The ground shifted, a pulse of darkness beneath her. It felt alive, writhing, as though waiting for her to falter. "Lily!" She cried again, voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm coming." But nothing echoed back except the laughter that clawed at her sanity. A flicker at the edge of her vision drew her attention. There, just beneath the surface of the shadows, she saw movement. Wispy figures wove in and out of sight, peering from dark corners, their eyes glimmering with predatory anticipation. They formed grotesque shapes, twisted like tortured reflections, tugging at her consciousness with whispers of lost promises and abandoned dreams. "Mommy! Play with us!" The chorus chimed, threaded through the air, pulling on her heart with familiar desperation. It was a refrain she knew all too well. Yet, there was a twisted undertone, a mocking lilt that sent shivers down her spine. Adrenaline coursed through her, fighting back the dread that threatened to swallow her whole. "No! You're not my Lily. She swung her arms, trying to dispel the fog, but the shadows merely thickened, consuming the light. The grasp on her ankle tightened, icy fingers biting into her flesh. "Come back, Mommy," it was a plea, a bait in the web of horrors. The weight of guilt crashed over her. Was she abandoning her daughter? The thought lit a tiny spark of rebellion, fierce and unyielding. Gathering every ounce of willpower, she ripped her foot free, exploiting a moment of confusion from the shadows. But the thick darkness coiled tighter, dragging her down once more. Just as her resolve began to falter, she remembered the stories. Whispered legends of a realm that ensnared souls, feeding on their fears, twisting them into grotesque reflections of what they once were. "I can't be a part of this," she roared, and her anger surged, filling her chest with warmth that pushed against the cold. With a defiant scream, she lunged forward again, determined to confront whatever lurked behind the veil of torment. Each desperate step was met with the howls of anguish from the shadows, shaking the very fabric around her. But she didn't stop. Lily. The name shot from her lips like a bullet, cutting through the veil. In response, the shadows quivered, momentarily retreating, creating an opening. Sarah seized it, racing through the breach as grotesque faces twisted in furious surprise. Outside, the world was a warped reflection of her memories, a distorted version of the home she once knew. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, fragments of light flickering through the splinters. There, at the center of it all, she saw her daughter, or what looked like her daughter. Even in the ghastly illumination, the girl's eyes gleamed with an unnatural depth that felt both inviting and terrifying. "Mommy, come back," Lily coaxed, the voice sweet and yet sinister. But before Sarah could respond, a deep rumble echoed through the hall, and the shadows surged toward her. It was as if they were alive, hungry entities mourning the unyielding strength of her spirit. "No!" she screamed, spinning towards the door. Barely holding on, she sprinted toward it. But the last sliver of light faded, engulfed in an overwhelming howl of despair. Something powerful dragged her back, grasping at her remaining hope. "Stay with us," the voices echoed, distorting until Sarah couldn't tell them apart anymore. As she stumbled, pulled toward the figure of her daughter, fear clawed at her throat. Was it too late to turn back? What was she truly willing to sacrifice? Gripped by indecision, Sarah felt the shifting shadows pull at the essence of her being, and the world around her began to spiral into a darkness deeper than before. What decision would Sarah make in the face of unimaginable horror? Would she embrace the darkness, or fight against the tide? The truth was closing in. And as the shadows whispered promises twisted with deceit, time was running out. Sarah's breath became a ragged gasp, caught between the magnetic pull of the shadows and the suffocating weight of dread. Each moment felt like an eternity as she fought against the grasping tendrils of darkness that sought to tear her apart. The shadowy figures writhed, their laughter an unsettling melody that echoed in her ears, each note pulling her further down into despair. Fear clouded her judgment while her thoughts raced. Was this what awaited all who wandered into their domain? A fate sealed in the embrace of the unseen. "Mommy, please." The voice materialized again, pleading yet sinister, a carbon copy of her daughter wrapped in something malevolent. Sarah staggered, straining to focus on the familiar shape that danced amid the shadows. If she could reach her, if she could just hold Lily, but with every step, the darkened figures closed in, circling like vultures. The taste of bitterness filled her mouth as she remembered sweet laughter, innocent games, and bedtime stories, moments that seemed so far away now. She could feel her heart thumping, each beat an echo of a fleeting hope. Desperation surged through her veins. "Get away from me!" she screamed, her voice cracking under the strain, fragments of resolve splintering like glass. With a fierce twist of will, she launched herself toward her daughter's silhouette, only to find the chilling truth wrap around her tighter. "Stay with us," the voices shifted again, distorting into an unholy cacophony, and the air turned electric. Sarah felt a growing emptiness that lured her deeper into a whirlpool of shadows. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting against the intoxicating call of oblivion. A flicker of light caught her eye, a distant glimmer of warmth amidst the endless dark. It whispered her name softly, promising a way out, a reprieve from the endless darkness. "Lily! I'm coming!" She shouted into the abyss, trusting that ache in her heart that kept her anchored. The faint glow pulsed, challenging the shadows, urging her onward, but the deeper she reached into the shadows, the more they fought back. Tendrils of darkness burrowed under her skin, claws tugging at her mind. Memories invaded her thoughts every moment she failed, the times she was too busy, too distant. Was this punishment for her neglect? Suddenly, Lily's figure morphed, contorting grotesquely. The innocence twisted into something predatory, her beloved daughter's face hanging like a mask pulled too tight. "You left me, Mommy," she hissed, her voice a shattering echo that sunk deep into Sarah's core. "No!" Sarah cried, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clawed against the barrier of darkness. The coldness seeped into her bones, merging with her fear. But then a surge. A flicker of resistance ignited within her. She pushed through, fueled by desperation and love, breaking free from the guile of the shadows. Light. Bright light. The vision of her daughter crystallized into something pure, a lifeline in the chaos surrounding her. Lily. The name burst from her lips, raw and uncontainable, as she lunged forward, reaching desperately for that fading light. In that instant, the world around her quaked. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in anguish as if struck. A final push sent her through the veil, body shuddering violently as she emerged into a vast darkness, suspended in an infinite void, one last face searching for her amidst it all. An echoing voice whispered from behind her a promise twisted and sinister, urging her back into the depths. Stay with us. As her reality began to fray at the edges, Sarah felt the debilitating weight of indecision. Was this the end? Was she truly ready to abandon everything? An intoxicating mix of hope and despair spiraled within her, tumbling toward an unknown fate, but before she could anchor her thoughts, the ground beneath her began to dissolve, revealing a yawning chasm, darkness seething at its base. What lay beyond the edge? Just how far was Sarah willing to go for the one she loved? And was there a way out of this nightmare, or was she destined to join the shadows forever? Time was running out. And the abyss beckoned. The chasm widened, revealing teeth of darkness that snapped hungrily at the air. Sarah felt her breath quicken. Panic flooded her senses, urging her back as the shadows whispered promises of release. Just surrender. Come back to us, they coaxed, their voices smooth like silk yet laced with venom. Lily. The name tore from her throat, desperate and raw. She couldn't give in. The dazzling light remained a beacon ahead, yet it flickered, teasing her will to survive. If she wanted to reach her daughter, she had to leave the shadows behind. But how could she? The figures began crawling, slithering closer, their laughter morphing into a guttural chant of her name. Sarah. Sarah. Join us. Each repetition weighed like a stone in her heart, threatening to pull her down. The darkness licked at her heels, surrounding her, ready to consume every last fragment of her hope. That in a fierce burst of clarity, Sarah clenched her fists. She thought of Lily. The girl's laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief. I want to let you take her. She screamed, voice shaking but defiant. With that declaration, the shadows recoiled, hissing, swirling in a violent tempest. The air crackled around her, a looming storm of despair. Before the mass could regroup, she sprinted forward, each step pounding against a foundation of fear. The light wavered, but it wasn't extinguished. Sarah reached for it, palm outstretched, sensing warmth radiating from the core. Just as she was about to touch that brilliant glow, an enormous force collided into her, robbing her of breath and momentum. The shadows pushed back with fury, howling in agony. You don't belong here. A voice thundered, wild and feral. It echoed around her, rattling her bones. She felt the magnetic pull of the darkness, yet the pull of the light was stronger. It burned with purpose. Get away from me! She shouted, shoving against the shadow. For a moment, she was surrounded by silence as if the world held its breath. But then, from the recesses of the darkness, a figure emerged, an elongated silhouette that moved too fluidly. It raised a hand and pointed directly at her, finger bending impossibly at an angle. "Lily?" Sarah whispered, fear clawing at her throat. But no, this figure was wrong. It was twisted, its features contorted in a nightmarish parody of innocence. It stepped closer, and she knew its intent. "Stay with us," the figure spoke, its voice resonating with the myriad whispers of the shadowy throng. Sarah's heart raced, pulse pounding in her ears. This couldn't be her daughter. Her daughter was living, breathing, and somewhere beyond the darkness. "No. You're not my child." The words burst out like a raging fire, fierce and indomitable. With a roar of defiance, she lunged for the light, her arms extending, reaching, clawing for that bittersweet salvation. The shadows screamed, their cries intertwining as they surged forward. Pain shot through her, insidious pinpricks snaking into her skin, longing to pull her back into their fold. But Sarah reached for the light, every ounce of her being ignited with an unyielding love. "Mommy!" A cry emerged from the abyss. The sweet voice, so familiar and cherished, pierced through the din of despair. It brought her heart a moment of clarity, bolstering her resolve. "I'm coming, Lily." With desperation and fire fueling her, she leaped into the light, body quaking as the darkness writhed around her like a black sea, restless and furious at her defiance. As her fingers grazed that brilliant orb, the ground beneath her shook violently. Sarah felt a pulse not just of the light, but of something larger. A reminder that the abyss was hungry for every lost soul, thriving on their despair. And as she grasped the warmth, everything twisted, throwing her off balance. Sarah screamed, her body tumbling, caught between two worlds. Suddenly, the air thickened, the light flickered and darkened, and a deafening silence enveloped her as the shadows began to dissipate what lay on the other side of the emerging light. Did she truly escape the clutches of the abyss, or had she just stepped into something far worse? The answers slithered just beyond her reach, twisting and turning in the shadows that still lurked, waiting for her return. The world tilted violently as she tumbled through the light. A collar of darkness threatened to crush her, but she pressed on, fighting against it like a swimmer battling a riptide. Colors swirled around her, stretching and contorting, shimmering with an otherworldly energy. Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Sarah gasped, lungs desperate for air. She landed hard on a cold, smooth surface, the ground below rippling like water. Scrambling to her feet, she blinked against a fog that encased her. The light was gone. Panic clawed at her chest. "Lily!" she shouted, her voice echoing barely a whisper in the empty void. She stepped forward, the ground shifting beneath her like it was alive. Shadows stirred around her, pregnant with danger. Slowly, the heavy mist began to recede, revealing a vast expanse of desolation. She stood in a barren land, void of life, where jagged rocks jutted out like the teeth of a monstrous creature. "Look closer," a voice taunted, slithering around her like a snake. It was familiar yet filled with malice. "Where are you?" she cried, dread curling in her stomach like a clenched fist. The voice belonged to no one she wanted to meet. Each footfall echoed as she moved forward, every shadow seeming to watch her, anticipate her next move. She felt eyes in the darkness, watching and waiting. It was a hidden threat that turned her blood to ice. A glimmer in the distance caught her attention, a flicker of movement. With hesitant steps, she crept toward it, all instincts screaming to turn back. But the idea of Lily kept her tethered to this world. "Mommy!" The voice rippled through the air, a haunting echo that filled her with hope and despair all at once. "Lily!" she gasped, racing toward the flickering light that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. But as she got closer, the light shifted unnaturally. It morphed into a figure, the outline sharp and jarring against the gloom. It was not the embrace she longed for, but an apparition twisted in darkness, a ghostly mirage with hollow eyes that shone like embers. Are you ready to join us? It whispered, a cold breath of death wrapping around her. No. Sarah screamed, heart hammering. With a surge of adrenaline, she turned and ran, the figure a mockery of all she loved reaching for her. She couldn't stop, she could not let go of the chance to find her daughter. Mommy, another voice called, softer, full of promise and warmth. It broke through the dread like a sliver of sunlight piercing a storm. She stumbled, torn between two calls. Shadows clawed at her ankles, dragging her down as she fought to stay upright. Fear surged through her. I won't stop. I'm coming. Every chase echoed with the relentless beat of her heart, desperation driving her to push through the ethereal fog. Just as she felt her strength waning, she spotted something, a flickering door illuminated by a soft glow at its edges, shimmering against the gloom. Hope ignited deep inside her. Maybe it was a way back, maybe it led to Lily, but as she dashed toward it, the shadows swelled, growing into dark figures that whispered her secrets, exposed her fears, drawing closer and clawing at her sanity. Sarah, they taunted. Stay with us, the light will only bring despair. She panted, shaking her head. I choose to fight. Clenching her jaw, she lunged for the door, every fiber of her being focused on escaped consequences, but as she reached for the handle, a violent wind howled through the land, a primal force that yanked her back. The door trembled, threatening to close forever. Mommy! The cry pierced her, more desperate than before. I'm coming, Lily! She roared, as shadows enveloped her, pulling her into a vortex of night and fear. Would the door lead her to salvation, or would darkness consume her as it had done to countless souls before? Only one truth remained, the abyss would not let her go willingly. As her fingers grazed the icy handle, a shockwave pulsated through her. Time felt suspended, the world swirling around her, reverberating with the whispers of all she had lost and the dread of what she might still lose. In that fleeting moment, an impulse surged through her, an understanding that escaping was not merely a physical act, but a battle against something darker than the shadows that clawed at her heels. The whispers intensified, echoing across the desolate landscape as they coalesced into a deafening roar, resonating through her bones. Join us, surrender, they spoke as if drowning, as if every word dripped with an enticing, sinister promise. No! She shouted, wrenching the handle down with all her might, determined to break free. The door swung open, revealing a shaft of blinding light, a sliver of hope slicing through the heavy air. A rush of warmth clashed violently with the cold, dark mist that surged about her. But in that light, images flickered like photos in a frantic reel. Lily's laughter, her tiny hands clasping a crayon, the sparkle in her eyes. They twisted into grotesque images before morphing back into shadows, taunting Sarah with what she yearned for and what she dared not lose. The darkness recoiled momentarily, as if repelled by the light, but not for long. Tendrils of fear reached greedily toward Sarah, dark wisps twisting around her limbs like snakes intent on strangling the very essence of hope. Stay, they hissed, voices slipping through the cracks of her resolve. You belong with us. For each step she took towards the door, the ground beneath her morphed into a treacherous mire, dragging at her feet, clawing her confidence. She stumbled, her focus wavering as another wave of whispers hit like a gust of chilling wind. Lily's name hung like a haunting perfume, intoxicating yet bitter. Mommy! This time the voice shattered the air, drowning out the darkness and sending fresh adrenaline coursing through her. I'm coming. I will never leave you. With a final burst of energy, Sarah lunged forward, plunging into the doorway and through the veil of light. The sensation was electric, the warmth enveloping her like a soft embrace, urging her to let it pull her deeper. But as she crossed the threshold, the serenity shattered into chaos. The brilliant light flickered, pulsating like a heartbeat, fraying at the edges. The darkness shrieked around her, a tide of shadows pouring in, determined to drag her back down into the abyss. She staggered onto another world, regaining her footing, panting heavily. The light was dim here, casting long shadows that twisted eerily against crumbling walls. A dull throb resonated within her chest as reality set in. She was somewhere not entirely different, a distorted reflection of the life she'd once known, yet profoundly altered. "Lily?" Sarah called as she began to navigate through this strange place, her voice catching in her throat. The space felt alive, whispering, breathing, as if it wanted to reveal secrets hidden within its depths. Ahead, a flicker brought her to a halt. What seemed to be a small figure was darting among the shadows. "Mommy!" The cry, so familiar yet slightly distorted, echoed from the depths. Heart racing, Sarah moved cautiously towards it, the weight of dread pressing down on her. It was a familiar call, but two truths loomed larger in her mind: fear of what she might discover, and the grim reality that the darkness was never far behind that eye. In the distance, the shadows loomed, closing in around her. With each step forward, she had to confront not just the unknown dangers of this twisted world, but also the specters of her own making waiting to unveil dark truths. "Lily! I'm here." But as shadows slithered closer, an unshakable fear gnawed at her gut. What awaited her on the other side? Was it salvation, or a darker revelation? Suddenly, an ominous figure stepped forward, its form wreathed in darkness before Sarah could catch a glimpse of its face. The air grew thick as dread curled around her heart. "Your daughter doesn't belong to you anymore," it hissed, as the shadows swallowed the light around her once more. What horrors lay behind this new veil? Would Sarah's determination lead her to save Lily, or would the darkness reveal truths she was not prepared to face? The darkness pressed in, a suffocating shroud. Sarah's breath quickened, the words of the figure echoing in her mind like an unwanted refrain. Her heart raced, pounding erratically, mixing fear with an almost desperate resolve. "No! You don't get to take her!" She shouted into the void, feeling the weight of that truth in her bones. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and in that brief silence, she felt something was at hope. It surged within her, fighting against the crushing despair that threatened to swallow her whole. "I am not afraid of you!" She shouted again, her voice mighty against the storm, fractured but unwavering. Ahead, through the shifting darkness, she caught a glimpse of flicker of light, a small figure darting behind the ruins of what looked like her own home, but transformed and broken. "Lily!" She sprinted toward it, fueled by the sheer force of a mother's love. Each step felt monumental, as if she were running against a tide trying to pull her back. "Mommy!" A laugh cut through the shadows, bright but tinged with an echo of something darker. Her chest tightened as she continued, the voices of the shadows churning behind her, clawing at her mind. "You can't have her!" she screamed back. The figure turned, and Sarah could see it clearly now, a child dressed in an old, tattered dress, hair creeping over her face. And yet, something felt painfully wrong. The way the girl moved sent jolts of dread through her. Was it truly Lily? "Come, Mommy! We're waiting for you!" The voice was sweet, yet there was an undertone that rippled with something sinister, something that jolted Sarah to her core. "No, no!" she breathed, shaking her head violently. "You are not my daughter." The figure hesitated, the familiar outline flickering as the shadows danced. The darkness shivered, and the ground rumbled beneath her feet. The laughter bobbed and swirled, mixing with whispers of despair, echoing her own guilt. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Join us. The darkness can offer you rest, peace," it twisted in a low whisper. Don't resist. A chill crept into her very soul. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah pressed her fists to her temples and shouted, "I want my real daughter. Not the shadow's trickery. I will fight to find her." Light burst forth with a radiant brilliance, illuminating the space, pushing against the shadows like a dam breaking in a flood. For a moment, the darkness stepped back, retreating from the onslaught of purity that surged through her. She heard the child's voice call again, echoing through the din of chaos, a voice that held both warmth and panic. "Mommy, help me!" The anguish in that voice pierced through the chaos. This was her Lily, the pure sound of her daughter, unmistakable amidst the shadow's deception. Sarah charged toward that voice, racing through the burgeoning light, the world a blur around her. Sarah burst onto the threshold of a clearing bathed in blinding warmth. And there, amidst the shimmering light, was Lily, her daughter, alive and vibrant, fear-flecked eyes locked onto hers. "Mommy!" she cried, launching herself into Sarah's arms. With the embrace, a wave of warmth washed over Sarah, real and grounding. The darkness around them hesitated, a furious seething mass, dark against the growing light. "We won't be a part of you," Sarah shouted defiantly, holding tightly to her child, feeling the sweet thrum of life return to her body. "Mommy, it's so scary. They want to take me back." Lily trembled against her. "Not anymore," Sarah promised. "We're leaving this place." The shadows writhed, claws reaching toward them in a frantic grasp, howling in fury as they looked to consume the light. The ethereal glow brightened, melding into a force that radiated outward, driving back the encroaching dark. "Stick close to me," Sarah urged, her heart racing as she began to move, both fighting the shadows and making their way toward the threshold of light. Each step felt monumental, shadows sneering, claws clawing for dear life, their sinister whispers mixing with choking fear. "Join us," they hissed in a chorus, voices intertwining into a cacophony of anguish, but they could not reach her through the shimmering barrier. Sarah felt the light envelop her, tugging away the darkness as they drew nearer and nearer to escape. Lily clung to her, and the weight felt strangely light, hope surging in thrumming waves around them. "You'll never leave with her," a sinister voice shouted behind them, desperation tainted with an urgency laden with rage. "No!" Sarah roared defiantly, and in the eye of that moment, she turned, clutching Lily tight. Awash with love and fury, she thrust them both forward together. With a final burst of energy, they broke through. The shadows howled, retreating into the dark void as they surged through the light, emerging back into the waking world. They stumbled into the bright sunlit suburb of Maplewood, their home. No shadows lingered here, the air felt crisp and clear, filled with the sound of laughter, of children playing outside. "Mommy! We're home!" Lily giggled, and for a moment, Sarah forgot everything they had endured. Tears streamed down her cheeks as relief flooded her senses. "Yes, baby. We're home." Holding her daughter tight, they stood in that perfect moment of sunlight, knowing the shadows could no longer reach them. Sarah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with warmth and love as they walked into a new dawn, the past buried behind them. This was their fresh start, there would be no more whispers. No more fears, they had conquered the darkness together. And finally, they could begin to heal. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for more exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us keep this content coming. We want to hear from you, so flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this wild conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see the truth about Maplewood. The time is now.